Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning meeting. This is Two-Way. The platform has conversations like no other where peace, love, and understanding should animate all you do. And where you get to eavesdrop while Dan and Sean talk about the day coming up as if they were DC insiders, neither of whom is in DC. I love it when people call me a Beltway insider. I haven't lived in Washington since 1993. Anyway, thank you for being part of the conversation. If you're here on the Two-Way platform, please do what many, including Dean, have already done. Raise your electronic hand to be part of the conversation in just a few moments. And if you're watching on X or YouTube, no hand raising and no smack in the chat. Just put spirited conversation in there, and that will be great. We'll run through the day's events, talk about things, and then again get to your questions. Very happy to have you here on this summer Monday. Let's go to it. The president today, back in DC, no public events as of now, is having lunch with the vice president at 12:30, and that's it. That's so far the only thing on his schedule. But let's assume change could occur. House and Senate are both out until September 2. Mike Johnson is in Israel today doing various things. I think he's on his second day of the trip. Right as we go off the air, factory orders are due out. Texas Democratic legislatures are on the lam for justice. No justice, no peace, no staying in Texas because they don't want to provide a quorum to allow the governor and the Republican legislature to change the federal congressional district. So some of them at 10 o'clock will be in Albany, New York. It's a long way from Austin to Albany, where they'll be with Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. Some of them are in Illinois and spend part of their Sunday with the Democratic governor there, Governor Pritzker. 2 o'clock Eastern is the deadline that Governor Abbott has set for Democrats to come on back, or he says they will face arrest and expulsion. We've seen this before in previous times where Democrats have fled to places like New Mexico and elsewhere to avoid providing a quorum. And in theory, the legislature convenes at 4 Eastern today. We'll see what happens. All right. Big story over the weekend. It's the Friday. The president, in the wake of not particularly liking the job numbers, decided to do something about it. And he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, causing a fair amount of upset. Even, as they say, even Joe Kernan, when you've lost Joe Kernan. Here's Joe Kernan's mild upset this morning at what happened on Squawk Box 104.
I think it was suboptimal. I use that word a lot. Suboptimal, petulant, but I didn't spend, much time obsessing over the weekend about the end of democracy. I think we're okay. I will say.
Speaking of suboptimal and petulant, as Rachel Maddow would say, here's the president's analysis of the firing, 103.
Okay, thank you very much. We had a very good weekend in many respects. We're seeing phenomenal numbers in terms of the business we do with other countries and the business we do within our own country. I mean, really phenomenal numbers. We'll be announcing a new statistician sometime over the next 3-4 days. We had no confidence. I mean, the numbers were ridiculous, what she announced, but that was just one negative number. All of the numbers seem to be great. And so we'll see how that comes out. And if you remember, just before the election, this woman came out with these phenomenal numbers on Biden's economy. Phenomenal numbers. And then right after the election, they announced that those numbers were wrong. And that's what they did the other day. So it's a scam, in my opinion. My opinion is it's just additional scam.
On Russia, Mr.
About an hour ago, Kevin Hassett, the head of the National Economic Council, went on CNBC and semi-defended the president's decision to sack the BLS topper.
The president said on Friday that he believed that these numbers were rigged, that they were politically motivated. Do you believe that to be true?
As an economist, I like to go for what I can prove, and what I can prove is that the data have become very unreliable. As you know, I've been on this show on Squawk Box before I was here at the White House pretty much every jobs day for the last 20, 25 years, right? We would come up to New York and I'd be on set and we'd talk about the jobs numbers. And when I looked at the revisions that came out last week, I thought they had to be a typo or something. You probably thought so too. And, you know, it's something that has been a work in progress for us at OMB and CEA here at the White House to try to understand why the data have become so unreliable. You know, there's some part of the story about response rates and so on, but I think it's really important now that we get a fresh set of eyes over there to try to modernize the labor data, because it has to be transparent, it has to be reliable, it has to be something the market can make big bets on. And right now it's not. When the revisions are bigger than the number itself, then you know you got troubles.
So as I read Kevin Hassett, he's saying it's about competence, not ideology, that Donald Trump didn't fire this lady because she doesn't know because she's got an agenda that's hostile, but because she's not doing a good job. Mostly reports of how BLS operates suggest that she really has nothing to do with actually producing the data. Sean, what happens next on this story?
Well, I guess it depends on who they name. I think, let me go back a second. I think, as we talked about extensively, the way in which they set the predicate for the potential firing of Howell, whether or not you agree with it or not, the idea was to basically satisfy the threshold of did you have cause or not. And again, as you can, it's not a question of is he responsible for the overruns or not, whatever. But the bottom line is that the way the court would view it does that constitute cause? And the reason I bring this up is what was different about this was they didn't go out and, in my opinion, set the predicate, right? So I believe, as a non-economist, as someone who just looks at the numbers and whatever, I find the wild fluctuations intriguing. Maybe that's normal, maybe it's not. But I think that if they had gone back and explained, like, look at these wild fluctuations, and they didn't meet, there's criticism from economic institutions and key folks about what they're doing, then you could have said she didn't deserve the job. And so how they handle the replacement, I think, is going to be important, because I think it's one thing to fire someone because you don't like what they're telling you. It's another thing if they're incompetent or they're not doing their job. And that's why how they explain this will determine the answer to your question. If they just put a new person in, or a loyalist that is not seen as qualified for the job, I think you're going to have a longer story this week than if they appointed somebody who might be more of a career type, but they feel confident in, et cetera. So, I mean, the bottom line, the answer to your question is it depends on how they handle the replacement.
If they handle it poorly, do you think we'll hear from more Republicans on the Hill publicly that they're upset? We heard from some.
I think you might find a couple, like, the Don Bacons in Nebraska that are retiring and haven't been afraid to speak out. But most Republicans, as you saw there with Joe Kernan, it's like, okay, like, this isn't. So I don't think you're going to see a ton of outcry unless he appoints like someone like me, who got a D in economics and is pretty clear. Like, if he did some like right field choice that had no economic background, I think he would get some eyebrows raised. But barring that, no.
And the kind of catchphrase from the Blues on this is from the quote unquote authoritarian playbook. This has really struck a chord. This is like, back to like impeachment and like, violation of norms and constitutional crisis and undermining the credibility of the United States. Where are you in your own view of how bad this is, and where do you think this is headed next?
No, I think it's idiotic. And I think Sean actually kind of made a point that I think, if we look forward, is what to watch. The business community was kind of horrified because they know it's nonsense. They know that it was just like dumb being dumber. And so I think they are quietly reaching out to the White House to say, don't be dumb here. We don't want to become China with fake statistics, because we all plan and make decisions based on the data. So the data has been showing the economy has been softening in some areas, okay? Trump had no problem with revisions in the past. He had no problems with the positive numbers earlier in his term. So, look, he was, as Joe Kernan said, it's petulance. He's just a child. He didn't like it. He wanted to redirect. He wants to blame somebody. But we played a clip, or we may be playing it soon, of Kevin Hassert, who kind of let the cat out of the bag when he says, if you look back at the last 3 months, there is a softening. That's how people look at it. You don't live and die in one jobs report. You look at trend lines. Trend lines are not good. And so, it's a problem.
So let's talk about that.
By the way, Mark, one quick thing in the way you frame that question that is a tell. The Democrats have started to call everything over the weekend in terms of in various different things. They're back to an attack on democracy. Everything is outrageous. And the thing to me that's interesting for Democrats is that if everything continues to be the most outrageous, then nothing is. And they've Republicans back in the day, we called every candidate that ran dangerously liberal to the point where it lost its sting, right? It was sort of people had started to hear the term, and Democrats better be careful. Not that they care what I think, but the more you sanitize people to everything is a challenge to democracy and the end of the republic, to me, is going to create a bigger problem, because then nothing is, and it doesn't have that same challenge. And so they keep throwing around the phrase over and over again. And I just think that as we go forward, they're undermining their own future arguments.
Dan, I'm a little late to this sidebar, but do we need to get you some sunscreen?
Me?
Yeah.
No, why am I
Is that just my monitor? You look burnt to a crisp to me.
Oh no, he looks very, very tan.
Oh,
I say this respectfully, but he looks spray tan good. I mean,
my dermatologist would be upset if I were sun. I'm like 75 and 50, like all over. All right. You look like toothpaste on my face.
Must be my monitor. All right. You mentioned the economy, and we'll play Kevin Hassett in a second. 3 weeks ago, I'm old enough to remember 3 weeks ago when most of the economic data looked very good. It seemed like the economy was kind of in a sweet spot, and that the tariffs were not having a major deleterious effect that wasn't being offset by energy. Now, not only, this is backed up somewhat by Friday's data and some other data. Now the conventional wisdom has shifted to things are so bad, we'll be lucky if we don't have stagflation, and that the Fed will almost certainly cut rates quarter point next month. So here's Kevin Hassett, as Dan said, on the economy, 110.
On the jobs market?
Yeah, I think the jobs numbers were slower than we expected. I think that one of the explanations for revisions is they have more complete data. And so I think it is likely that the revisions are a better read of the data if the data are not being manipulated. And so, yeah, I would say that it's a little bit weaker. But don't forget, this is before the big, beautiful bill is really kicking in. And so with our eyes on the horizon, we're highly optimistic about the future of this economy. We've got the big, beautiful bill. We've got expensing of factories, got no taxes on tips. We've got incomes going up $10,000 for a typical family. And we've got all of that happening while the budget deficit's declining rapidly because of the tariff revenue. And so there are a lot of really good reasons to be super optimistic about the second half of the year. But absolutely, that jobs number, if the revision turns out to be true, does suggest that there's less momentum than we thought.
Dan, to paraphrase the favorite McCain question, are the fundamentals of the Trump economic policy sound?
To be determined right now. Look, I think when the facts change, people change their minds. And this is what people whose job it is to analyze this stuff all day, every day. The last few weeks, some of this data is starting to become quite concerning. And so you have companies right now doing their quarterly earnings calls. They're starting to warn about stuff. So, look, it may be that everything Kevin Hassert said, the big, beautiful bill kicks in. There are some upsides out there, but you also have to acknowledge that there are some downsides. And the problem politically is that Donald Trump sells victory. Victory, victory, victory. Everything is the best, the greatest. Like, I got it, no sweat. We're dominating, we're kicking butt. The problem is when that doesn't happen, he doesn't do, well, there's a soft spot, maybe, whatever. The only time he ever did it was on the Liberation Day when he used the golf phrase, we got the yips a little bit. But otherwise, he doesn't like talking about things not being great. So he fired somebody.
Sean, is there, leave the politics aside, is there genuine concern about the economy going forward?
Up until last week, I was very The one thing I'll say, and you guys know my theory on this, I think that when I walk around now and talk to people or bump into them, how are you doing? It's a very much more positive view than say a year and a half ago. People feel more confident. I don't find the same trepidation when you talk to individuals. That's not data. That's anecdotal. That's like yard signs in a campaign. But I don't get the same vibe that I did a year ago where people were nervous about the ability to pay the bills. So I still think when you look at a lot of the other indices in terms of how the markets are doing, et cetera, we're good. I do think that, we should keep an eye on these things. It's like going in to see a doctor where they tell you, look, everything looks good. There's a couple markers that I want to keep an eye on. Let's get back and do some tests in a month or so. So, we'll see. But I maybe feel a notch less than I did based on the numbers. But as I said, when I talk to people and communicate with, from all around, how are you doing? You don't get that same fear that you did a year ago. So at least on that level, it's different.
Mark, can I make one flag though about what Sean just said, which is if you look at surveys, political surveys, it seems like the upper kind of class feels good. The markets are good. Consumer confidence at the upper end. But you keep seeing dissatisfaction with inflation, dissatisfaction with the economy in the middle and lower class in surveys. And that to me is like, for us Democrats, we got caught in this. Biden kept saying the markets are good. The upper class felt really good coming out of COVID, but the working class was struggling. Sean, I don't think according to surveys, they don't feel good. And that is a problem because, as you say, it's hard to convince someone in their gut things are good until they tell you, yeah, I feel good about this.
Yeah, and we'll see. Like I said, I acknowledge that there could be an issue, and that's why I think in another month, if we see some further issues kind of come through these different reports, that might change things. But for now, I mean, again, probably a little bit more concerned, but not freaking out.
I think it's a fair tell to say, or fair interpretation of the tell to say, when the president includes "thank you for your attention to this matter" to his Truth Social post, that he's a little concerned about where things stand. So here he is repeating his position just moments ago on the jobs report. Says they were rigged, talks about his past case where his facts are a little off, saying they were rigged, and says the numbers were concocted in order to make a great Republican success look less stellar. I will pick an exceptional replacement. Thank you for your attention to this matter, MAGA.
It's also interesting, Mark. He's equating it to the presidential election, which is like, I think he's trying to get MAGA fired up. Yeah. Right. He's trying to conflate the red meat here and toss it in there. And that says to me, he's utterly desperate.
Yeah, everything but the kitchen sink and crooked Hillary.
Yes. Just give it till lunchtime.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to get bogged down in the next topic, but I do want to hear what you guys think. Sean, Thune and Schumer were close to a kind of a grand bargain about moving along nominees and about appropriations, but they're really at loggerheads because the Democrats do not want any more rescission bills sent up and packages sent up, and it looks like the administration is not backing down on that. So where do you think we will be when the Senate returns? Will there be a nuclear option to change the way nominations are handled, or will there be some sort of deal?
Well, actually, I would take it a step back. I'm actually outraged the Senate walked away from this. John Thune should have sat there and said, Democrats love their recess as much as Republicans do. I acknowledge the fact that these guys, I like when members are in their district or in their state, not in DC. Nothing good happens when you're in Washington, DC. That being said, they have one job. Only the Senate can actually approve.
I have to stop you. The president told them to go home.
No, well, I think the president got sold a bill of goods, to be honest with you. And I feel like they went and we can't get it. The one thing that they could have done is just jam them and said, great, we'll stay here. We'll run the clock. Because that's the dirty little secret about nominations is that you can put them on the floor. There is room on the calendar, and then Dems play a time game. And so I think that I hope that MAGA gets fired up about this because we got 7 people out of over 160. That's pathetic. The Senate should be ashamed of themselves, and every senator that went home and bought into that should
Well,
So
maybe the president shouldn't have told them to go home. But what do you think is going to happen when they get back? Nuclear
just to
option?
be clear, I don't think
Nuclear
the
option or
president
no?
didn't tell them to go home. They sold the president that they
Well,
couldn't go any further.
He put it on Truth Social.
I
Go
know
home.
what he.
Go home.
Well, according to actually the reports, Thune
Yeah.
called Trump with a deal. He had
Yeah.
a deal with Schumer, and Trump said
But that's
no.
my point, Dan. There should never have been a deal.
Yeah.
That they
Sean-
didn't have to.
So Sean,
So
yes or
Thune-
no? Well,
Thune
Sean,
screwed up.
No, because
before
it's not
before
the reason.
before
the
Dan
reason,
before
okay.
Dan weighs in, will there be the nuclear option or not?
But here's my point, and this is what I'm trying to get through, is that hopefully between now and then, that we get to a point where while these guys are home, I think that truth that's gonna go bye-bye real quick, and the president's gonna change his tune and say the Senate should come back in. This is ridiculous. I only got 7 of my nominees. Between now and September, I think that's where you head. That they actually are forced to come back in. So I think, look, if the idea that what we were sold was a bill of goods, that this was a deal we had to take, not true. The idea that we have to come back and do the nuclear option on nominees, not true. The Senate and the Senate Republican leadership should do their job. And
Dan,
so I hope it doesn't come to a nuclear option, because it doesn't need to be. They just need to actually do their job.
Dan, what's going to happen next?
They'll ultimately get a deal, but I want to say this: bravo, Chuck Schumer, because what he dug in on was we approved spending. You're refusing to release the money, which there's huge questions constitutionally if you can do that, and you want us to agree to a deal and then turn around and send a rescission package where you only need 50 votes and undo the deal. So why should we trust you? And that he has such a strong hand that John Thune had a deal with him Saturday night, apparently. So I'm amazed that Sean and MAGA is livid with John Thune and his colleagues, who apparently are screwing up. Amen to Chuck Schumer, because here's the thing, Sean, if you come back in September and you do the nuclear deal, what's 3 weeks later? The budget.
Dan, I'm with you on this. This is my point.
Hold on. I think that going into this, take the conversation we're having out, we would get crushed on a shutdown. Like,
yes.
We would fold. If you do the nuclear option, I do think the public says, wait a second. Like, it's a little inside baseball, but it's like, what are you doing here? And suddenly it gives us a fighting chance to say they're out of control for Trump. And even John Thune doesn't believe in it. So good job, Chuck Schumer.
Well,
look, I loser of the week last week.
I don't disagree with everything. I mean, like, not all, but we shouldn't have to. Like, I agree. Like, the idea that he got stuck on a deal is ridiculous. They should have played the clock and just said, we're going to sit here. And at some point, you're right. Chuck Schumer went from caving to winning. That's ridiculous.
But you don't have 60 seats, Sean. Like, at some point, this is how governing works. But you cut deals.
No, okay. But this is why I'm saying what we're missing in this discussion is 90% of the time, maybe. These nominees can go on the calendar. You can put them up for a vote, and all Democrats can do is run the clock, right? That's it. So I get they wanted to go home and go to the beach and maybe get in the RV or whatever it is, go to Geneva. But the bottom line is that they had another choice. They didn't take it. That's on them. And you're right. Democrats are looking at Chuck Schumer and saying, hey, dude, awesome for you. We only had to give 7. We gave nothing up, and we kept our hand. This was a massive tactical mistake by Republicans. And MAGA should be furious that President Trump only got 7 of his nominees.
All I'll say is that at some point, to Dan's point, the president, John Thune, are going to need to get 60 votes to do stuff. And if they can't do it on this, good luck in your senior year. Gaza, end of last week, Huckabee and Witkoff toured Gaza. The U.S. is now said to be talking with Israel about some grand plan to free all the hostages. And the president's rhetoric, which continues to toggle back and forth over the weekend and last night, was more pro-Israel, including the invocation of October 7th. Sean, where is the stand now? Is something about to happen, or is it or not? Are the hostages? Is there a plan to get the hostages out?
I feel like they're a little bit more. Witkoff's rhetoric over the weekend was a little bit more positive and optimistic than I've ever seen, and I have to believe that that's for a reason. But I don't. We go back to like why I don't get the why yet, and so if there's something brewing, great. But he was much more optimistic than usual, and again, I'm missing the why. Like, what has changed dynamically to make Hamas want to give up everything? Because as we've said before, the only thing that gives them leverage is having these individuals as hostages. So I hope that he's right and that he's got a card that he's just not telling everyone he's about to play, but they have yet to reveal the why.
Dan.
I agree with Sean. I don't have much more to add than that.
Okay. Russia, in theory, the deadline's coming soon. Again, just maybe neither of you know anything, but Dan, any sense of where we're headed on Russia this week?
No, particularly because the focus seems to be back on the Middle East. So if Witkoff is in the Middle East, I'm not sure, supposedly we're having conversations with senior Russian officials, but I don't know. I'll be surprised if he keeps the deadline.
Sean?
So this, to Dan's point, like they moved up this deadline. And that's great because I think it showed, but you better be rather like he can't now go the other way because if we finally got over Taco, and it hasn't been like on this issue, you moved it up for a reason. I have talked to some folks at very senior levels over the past 7 days, and they lead me to believe that the president is definitely all in on a new direction and that everything's on the table. Secondary tariffs, additional transfers. Obviously, it's Trump, so no decision is final until he says it. But there is a sense that he really has turned a corner and saying, then let's do what it takes to help Ukraine. So I expect some further announcements. I think that the sanctions and the secondary sanctions, and just so, and this is sort of what I gleaned in one of my conversations. It's interesting. We always talk about the net trade, so it's down to I think about 5.5 billion with Russia. But there's a lot of things that people have kept their eyes closed to, like sort of, how China used to move a lot of stuff to other countries and then ship to the U.S. to get around de minimis tariffs, etc. What the Russians have done is reflagged ships that they knew weren't Russian ships carrying certain goods and products and service or whatever. They're going to start going after that kind of stuff, I believe, which will be a new dynamic to really put up because there's a lot of stuff that the world has turned a blind eye on when it comes to Russia and its ability to export in particular. So I think that you're going to see a lot of these things not ratcheted up that haven't been used before.
I think the problem is you had the story over the weekend that India is going to keep buying Russian oil. I mean, they just
keep your eye on Secretary of State / National Security Advisor Marco Rubio this week on this matter. All right, Russiagate gate. I continue to read everything about this and trying to keep the conversation away from Barack Obama committed treason to this is all just absolutely nothing. I'm confident the answer lies somewhere in between those two things. Dan, based on your current knowledge of this story, what's the worst thing the Democrats did? In conjunction with trying to create the impression that Donald Trump's ties to Russia were greater than they actually were. It's the worst thing they did.
Well, I look at it differently because I think the statement you just made is a hindsight statement. And so I think at the time, this whole thing is about December, right? That's what this whole conversation is about.
Yeah, it's about 2016.
The majority of the outrage is about December and the summer, and the summer of 16.
Yeah.
To what I've read at this time, there is nothing that at that time to me says that it was outrageous. I get how things looked once all the facts came out, that some of the assumptions were wrong.
I'm asking you what the worst thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think.
What's the worst thing? What's the worst thing the Clinton campaign did from your point of view?
I don't know. I mean, part of this, Mark, is, and I'm not trying to be like, team blue and dig in, is there's so much stuff out there that some of what I've read, I don't even believe is true. Like in the sense of I'm trying to figure out what is like a fact that is out there that I'm like, ooh, I didn't know that fact.
Sean, amongst red bloggers and talkers and influencers, what's an accusation that's made that you think is wrong and should be set aside and not considered part of the conversation?
I don't know. I think part of the problem is we haven't looked. Part of what I actually think the problem is that there's a lot of smoke here, and I think it deserves investigation. And therefore, when I say that, I mean, like, The problem, the reason we don't know what's quote unquote wrong is because we were sold a bill of goods, told we couldn't talk about it, weaponized it against us, and now we're being asked, well, what don't we like? And the more that stuff comes out, I think that's the issue. I want someone to actually look through it and say what is true, what is the reality. But I don't really care about the statute of limitations at this point. There's enough serious accusations in there about material that was weaponized, coordination among campaign officials and U.S. government officials. That I want a serious investigation into this and people held accountable. But I can't answer the question until that happens.
All right.
Mark, I guess the one thing I would say, because I'm looking at the chat, it to my knowledge, the Steele dossier was not the basis for everything. It was a slice of the pie that went into their calculation. That obviously, in hindsight, was wrong, right? So at the time, the way that was treated as more likely to be real than not, right, was a wrong decision. But I keep seeing people say that was what they based everything on. From what I've read, and you go back to the Mueller report, the Senate bipartisan report that, again, Marco Rubio co-wrote, that was not the basis for the decision. So that's why I say trying to figure out fact from fiction and kind of the, like, to Sean's point, there's so much smoke that may be that some of that smoke ends up being real. And I'll be the first when it's proven to be like, that's wrong. But I think there's a lot of smoke in the other direction too.
Can I ask can I ask Mark's question a different way? Is there something in that report that has come out that you can say there is no way that happened? Like, I'll ask it the other way. Is there something that you've said? So right now, and let me just repeat what I believe the facts are. There was a dossier, the Steele dossier, that we can all agree exists in Israel. I've read it. I've seen it. I know that's true. I think that's a given fact. There is, and I'll paint this in the best possible light. There is an accusation that senior officials from Hillary Clinton's campaign, in coordination with her, funded by the Soros Foundation, in coordination with them, used that information, gave it to the FBI and other officials to help deflect from her own personal scandals. The FBI then used that as the basis for an investigation. Barack Obama then used information from that to deflect information, certain things that in one way versus another to create an impression of Donald Trump. That's how I think mostly MAGA would interpret this. Okay. And again, I'm being generous.
Yeah.
That being said, if I read off what I believe the litany of the things are, what among those things would you object to?
I would say that's like a tenth of the picture, right? And that's the challenge. That's why when Devin Nunes did the report to begin with, it was not given any credibility. Remember, Donald Trump was president when that thing came out. Like, it wasn't a and the reason it just petered off, and even Senate Republicans ran away from it, was a tenth of the picture.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to put a pin in this real quick. Based on the description, if I wrote like that narrative that I just gave, which again, I think is the most toned down version of the MAGA interpretation of this, is there anything that I said, regardless of whether it's one piece or not, is there anything that I said that you would say, I don't believe that that's true?
The Barack Obama part.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think how the Clinton campaign dealt with it, and then how the senior U.S. government officials dealt with it, I think there's a missing part in your logic, which is that I do not believe that Barack Obama sat there after the election and even leading up to it and said the Steele dossier, like, let's go play with this. I think their alarm bells were going off with what they were seeing in the real world, and they didn't know what was happening. And again, in the Hillary Clinton world, you know what they would say? God damn it, he was a total, I'll use a soft word, kitty cat, for not raising the alarm bells during the election because he didn't want to seem political. That's the Clinton world interpretation of how Obama dealt with 16.
Yeah. Two more topics and then to your questions. Guys, let's do these quick. Texas redistricting. There's going to be a lot of, all this drama about arresting people, et cetera, fining them, court challenges. Dan, will Texas Republicans successfully redistrict the state to the benefit of the party?
Yes, by the end of the year.
Sean.
50-50.
50-50.
Ooh.
And which state is most likely to be a Democratic offset, Dan?
California may pick up one seat, but I don't think there are any more seats in blue states to squeeze.
Sean?
So I two things. One, on the Dem side, if you go through the map and where they can legally do it, I don't see another. I mean, California has to get court approval. So we'll see. That being said, part of the reason I answered the question that I did is that I'm becoming skeptical that the legislature in Texas really wants this, meaning they're going to go through the motions. And how long Dems hold out. I think this might be like, as I just expressed my displeasure with the Republicans in the Senate for wussing out and going home. I think that Texas Republicans may say, gosh, we tried, we hung out for a while, Democrats waited us out, nothing we can do, right? I'm not, and I don't mean that I know a bunch of the members of the Texas legislature. This is more about their leadership, which I will tell you, in talking to them, they have a problem with. And so I do wonder if the Texas House leaders basically wash their hands of this and say, we tried, the Democrats just hung out in Illinois, in Boston too long. So that being said, and just to be clear, there's a lot to go down here, right? We're probably going to pick up 2 seats anyway. The Cuellar seat and the Vicente seat, I think, are trending the right way anyway. So we probably could get those regardless. And then you're questioning, is it worth the squeeze to go after these other 3 seats and make it more of a Hispanic bent, which we should be able to, but might not be able to keep. And so I think, look, just keep in mind, though, the thing that I find fascinating about all the interviews that occurred over this weekend is they're acting like Republicans started this. Democrats, whether it was Illinois, Maryland, whatever, they did this. New York tried to do it last cycle and just got stopped by their own court. Wisconsin literally ran a Supreme Court.
We didn't try to redistrict just now. It was
in New York
this year. We
no,
didn't try.
No. I said last cycle.
I don't think so. Like
the court stopped it. So
right,
I mean,
this
is not a partisan thing.
Last topic. Laura Loomer on her show on Friday said maybe she's better off not being in the government because she doesn't have to play by the governmental rules. She continues to work her way through the federal government, trying to get people fired. She still wants 2 or 3 cabinet secretary fired. Here's the president last night when asked about Laura Loomer. 108, please.
Mr. President, what is your relationship with Laura Loomer? What kind of influence with Laura Loomer? What kind of influence does she have in the White House? I think she's very nice. I mean, I know she's known as a radical right, but I think Laura Loomer is a very nice person. I've known her for a long time. And, personally, I think she's a patriot. And she gets excited because of the fact that she's a patriot. And she doesn't like things going on that she thinks are bad for the country. I like her. Okay? President, actress Sydney Sweeney.
Sean, is Laura Loomer's influence falling, rising, or static?
Rising.
Dan?
I defer to Sean.
The correct answer is rising.
Wow.
She's about to get some big scalps, I think, ladies and gentlemen. Stand by. All right, let's bring in your questions. As always, you'll unmute. You'll tell us where you are, what's on your mind. Dean, welcome in. Thank you for being part of Two-Way. You could unmute, Dean. I'll ask you again. There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Can you
welcome.
hear me now?
Yes, sir. Welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Good morning. Thank you for calling on me. You didn't really mention explicitly tariffs this morning, but there was news over the weekend that we'll be imposing, I think, a 39% rate on Switzerland, which I think was kind of an amazing development. If you'll indulge me this morning, I'd just like to make a couple of general comments on tariffs and then ask you a specific question on some
Yes,
of
sir.
the litigation that's
Yes, sir.
going on. I think that you 3 have exhibited a range of views on tariffs over the last couple of months when you've discussed them. I think probably Sean, it's fair to say, is the most enthusiastic. Mark, maybe you are somewhat enthusiastic. Dan, I think you're least enthusiastic. And I'm in your camp on that, Dan. I think that when you say that the United States has imposed tariffs on foreign countries, that sounds like kind of a reason to celebrate a victory, that we've done something to level the playing field. But I think that's only half of the issue. and this certainly isn't a new thought with me, but the other half of it is who's really paying the tariffs. And I think under US law that initially it's US importers, companies like Walmart, for example, that actually pay the tariff directly to the US government. And the fear, of course, is that it will be passed on to consumers. And I think that that's a point that honestly has to be made by people. Kevin Hastert in the clip you played earlier was almost joyful over the fact that tariffs are bringing in revenue to this country. And I think they maybe should be a little bit embarrassed about that because it's really US parties that are paying those tariffs. It's almost like another tax. So my point on all of this being, yeah, tariffs might be a good way to try to level the playing field, open US markets, but there's another component to it that could really hurt US consumers. So those are my comments. The question is about the litigation in the International Tariff Court in New York that is being appealed at the federal circuit level at the moment. You're probably aware, and maybe you discussed the fact that the judges in that circuit court were fairly negative about the government's case, negative about the fact that the administration had the power to impose the taxes in the first case. I wouldn't be surprised if that appeals court rules against the Trump administration again. And then the question is what happens? It may go to the Supreme Court. I'm a retired lawyer, and our law professors used to say that hard facts make bad law. And I see this as being set up at the Supreme Court. You've got a situation where the government has had meetings with many, many different countries over the last few months on this and has imposed tariffs. Is the Supreme Court going to look at this and say, gee, we can't really change that? Or are they really going to look at the law and come out with some sort of reasonable decision? I think the standard is whether there's an unusual or extraordinary kind of emergency that would justify imposing these kind of tariffs. And I'm wondering if you think that the Trump administration will be able to meet that standard.
My rule: never predict judges, juries, or justices. So I'm not inclined to dig deep into it, but I think they will take the case, and I think there's maybe a 50-50 chance they side with the president because they're result oriented. They're not a rigorous lawyer like you. They're a bunch of politicians in robes, and I think he can get 5 votes to say that he's got extraordinary executive power. As you know, this court has been deferential to the notion of the unitary executive and a lot of power for the president. And if they are struck down, I think they'll come back and reimpose them with some other justification. So I'm not sure it matters. I think probably in the short term, the biggest consideration would be, does this lower court stay enforcement until the Supreme Court can hear the case? I suspect they will, in which case it doesn't really matter how they rule. Sean.
All right.
It's a great question you're asking. It's actually even more complicated because so Congress has the authority, constitutional authority for tariffs and trade. A lot of that has been delegated to the president. But to your point, when you read this IEPA statute, the question, and then I think this is where the first court ruled, is saying we never envisioned Congress looking at it to solve those kind of national emergencies. So right now they're dealing with a stay, and that's a very different. You haven't had a court rule that they have the authority. And so that's going to be the problem, is that fundamentally, this isn't about whether the president has the authority to do something or not in the executive, because it's an inherently constitutional power given to Congress, that Congress legislatively gave parts of to the executive to do negotiations. So I think this might be an area where the court actually could potentially not side with the administration, because it's not about the executive overseeing the executive, as is the case with funding and with staff. This is a congressional role that Congress has piece by piece given to the president, and very specifically. So I think this is going to be fascinating how this thing plays out. And this is the one time when I think the court, especially, it could come down and say, we agree that the president is addressing something. But again, the one other point, and I made this when I discussed the firing of Powell, is the predicate to this, the national emergency. I think they did it beautifully with Mexico and Canada and made it about fentanyl. So it was a national emergency. When you're doing it writ large, when the court looks at it and says, what is the authority? I mean, what is the emergency that you're basing this use of IEPA off of? That's where I think they might have some problems. And the underlying predicate of the emergency is going to matter. They did it well in Canada. They did it well in Mexico. I'm not so sure that the court's going to rule in their favor in this case. But why it gets really complicated is then they have to figure out what to do with the duties and tariffs collected. And that was part of the problem with the first court, is it said, we don't even know how to deal with this because they have taken this money in, and that's going to be a problem.
Dan.
Yeah, Dean, I don't think Switzerland has a high production of fentanyl. Just to, watches, but not fentanyl. Look, I read there was a story in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday about Christmas suppliers warning that everyone out there, if you need to get Christmas lights, they are saying buy them now because one, the prices are going to surge. Two, there is a huge shortage brewing of Christmas supplies because a lot of it is made overseas. So I think not only do consumers end up paying more, but Mark always talks about back to school, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Those are your moments where consumers check in and say, oh my gosh, something is more expensive. I don't like this.
Maybe buy a lot. Dean, Thank you. Grateful to you for
I ordered my Christmas lights this weekend.
Okay. Ken, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Dan and Sean.
Oh, look at that background.
In Pembroke, Mass. The home of gerrymandering was actually on the North Shore, just as a point of history. Getting back to tariffs, one of the things that hasn't been discussed is, we have a component called the businessman that's negotiating. I mean, Trump's a negotiator, but businessmen are negotiators. And if I'm bringing in goods from a foreign country, I might not be able to sell a good if it's 15 or 20 or 30% more expensive. So I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back on the supplier and maybe on the middleman because I know my consumers just aren't going to buy it. So the bottom line here, nobody's talking about the fact that effect hasn't taken place yet. Everybody's assuming the worst. 15% will never those goods will never be sold in the United States again. Well, the supplier wants to sell their goods. The U.S. is the largest market in the world for consumer goods. That's just not going to stop. Now, consumers aren't going to pay 15 or 20% more. They'll just, as you mentioned earlier, just stop buying. So my question is, why is no one talking about that part of the negotiation that the business people? I mean, you take Walmart. You think they're going to just sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I'll pass this 30% or 15% on to my consumers," or are they going to push back really hard on the supplier and on the shippers and any middlemen?
Well, you can only the challenge, Ken, is you can only squeeze the middleman so much. So if it's a 30% delta, you may get it down to 15. But Walmart's legendary for squeezing every ounce of the rag out of their logistical, pipe. That there's only so much you can tell somebody before you. I also think a lot of CEOs are working with the administration to try to get exemptions, to try to get them to see the light, which is what happened on Liberation Day. And I think the president, and I applaud him for this, they do hear them. They do hear executives, and he navigates.
And that's a negotiation that's probably going on, I would assume, behind the scenes. And yet the sky is falling. We hear the sky is falling, that 15% or, I mean, we had cumulative under Biden of about 23, 24% inflation. And now we're down to 2.7. And again, the sky is falling because it was supposed to be at 2. So
look, but Ken, that started happening in Biden in 23 and 24. Inflation went down rapidly.
True.
Okay. Our current president made it seem like it was accelerating rapidly. Okay. I mean, this is what happens. I mean, but inflation went down under Joe Biden at the end. It went up under him, and then it went down. And when he tried to tell voters it was a temporary thing, you're much better now, and we're better than the rest of the world, didn't go over very well.
No, but it was the cumulative effect, too. Because, inflation went down, but the cumulative effect over the 4 years is still present.
So the question is the cumulative effect of tariffs starting to enter the system?
Well, I think it already has
don't know.
to a certain extent. So is that, an overhang? It's going to cause as they say, stagflation. I mean, I think the jury's still out. I mean,
Oh, I agree completely. Yep.
but
Sean.
so
I agree. I mean, to the point that the jury's still out, there is this false assumption. I listened to Jonathan Carl do a report for this week over the weekend, and it's just as if they have any sense. I mean, I personally talked to different business owners about how they're dealing with tariff rates. Some of them are eating it. Some of them are passing it on to consumers. Some of them, I talked to a major company the other day that's moving operations from one country to another. And who had talked to another CEO that was telling him they're just going to absorb the. I mean, so the idea that it's all going to hit consumers, which is what the media and the left is telling us, is simply not true. In some cases, it will. In some cases, it may be delayed. In some cases, not at all. But companies are doing it in different, adjusting in different ways. And then I had a discussion with a rather high-level DC representative of a major company who is rooting for tariffs against another country because it'll give them an economic advantage for their U.S. market. So it's the dynamics here are in play, right? Sometimes we're going to benefit. Sometimes it may cost you a little bit more. But like the idea that it's a cookie cutter result, which I think, Ken, you were alluding to correctly, is not true. It's simply not a fact. And yet the media, largely the legacy folks, want to pretend that this is all doom and gloom. It has been from the beginning, and they're cheering on anything that will allow their narrative to be true.
exactly. And that's my point. I mean, it's so frustrating when the truth isn't getting out there. This is dynamic, it's complicated, and it's not cookie cutter. So I think just if you can, you guys are spreading the word of what's really true, and I think that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a hard thing because you have Trump derangement syndrome on the left and you have Trump worship syndrome on the right.
Nelson,
it's hard to find the truth in between.
Nelson, you with us? Unmute if you would, and tell us what's on your mind where you are.
Hi, everybody. I honestly had the weird idea that we should have a co-ed golf tournament. And Sean seemed to be excited by the idea, and he's going to talk to Trump, but nothing happened?
I'm sorry, say that again, Nelson. I didn't hear the first part.
I remember I called about a month ago, and I said, we ought to have a co-ed golf tournament, and you said we have it in 50 states. And I thought you were going to get Trump to tee it up, but it didn't happen?
It hasn't been on my. I'll have to see where that is on my list of agenda items with the president. Generally, you don't get past one or two. So,
all right, Nelson, we'll keep working on the tournament. Don't worry. Haley, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Sean and Dan.
Hi guys, morning from New York. First things, I just wanted to shamefully replug our two-way picnic that's happening this Saturday in New York Central Park.
Tell people the details, Haley.
We're gathering Central Park. We have a sign-up sheet that we're going to put in the chat. Bunch of us are, meeting for the first time, and we'd love for as many two-way members as possible to come if you're in the New York area. We have people coming in from Florida, Texas, all over. So it's going to be really, really fun. And
I'll be there. I'm taking the train back. I'll be there Saturday. Yep.
We're so excited. Awesome. So I don't want to talk about Gaza, surprisingly, shockingly. I wanted to actually, this has been on my mind for like the past week or so. It is connected to the New York mayor race. And Mark, I am trying to take my cues from you since you're obviously like my politics guru. So I'm trying to get some peace, love, and understanding for our, probable mayoral mayor.
Yeah.
I wanted, because you mentioned that there has been basically he has been trying to reach out to the Jewish community. I didn't hear any overtures or anything that he's possibly been saying or doing. So I wanted to ask if there was any report, anything, any reporting of anything he's doing that is trying to reach out to, to my community and trying to help it. And if you think it's going to be effective, and if you think that, all of you, obviously, if you think that it's going to help him get, gain some support from, I think, his weakest demographic.
Yeah, I saw a poll over the weekend. I'm not sure if it was legit or not. I didn't recognize the pollster saying he's actually winning amongst Jewish voters. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I don't either.
He's got lots of private meetings. As you know, he's got endorsements from a few people who are prominent New York Jews, and he's meeting with more, and of course he's trying to get Schumer's endorsement. The Staten Island Democrats over the weekend cast their lot with him, and really you don't see much movement in the race right now. So I keep telling people, like, you can say you don't like his policies, but I think it's wrong to call him anti-Semitic. And I just this morning was talking to a friend of mine who's a Jewish American who lives in New York, and I just think using the phrase anti-Semitic for him there's no evidence he's anti-Semitic. There's evidence that he's hostile to Israel or doesn't prioritize Israel the way some other people do. But I don't think he's anti-Semitic, and I think he will get more endorsements from prominent Jews coming up relatively soon.
I just wanted to say, like, I saw his speech when he was after the shooting in New York, and when he was talking about the police, and he really did backtrack, and I was like impressed. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I thought that was exactly what he should say, exactly what he should be doing. So when he talks about the whole issue of globalize, the phrase globalize the intifada, it's just like, why can't he do the same thing with that? Like, what is stopping him from just going that 2 feet and just saying bad phrase, bad term? That's like what kind of got me on that question.
There's two schools of thought on that, and one's worse than the other. Dan.
Yeah, I think it's because with young voters, he doesn't want to alienate them by going there. I think, Haley, the one thing I've heard he's doing is in private meetings, he's Jewish New York City residents are saying to him, do you understand why we feel unsafe? And do you understand why our kids feel unsafe at schools or whatnot? He apparently is saying, I do. And the phrase he keeps using to them is, public safety is like #1 for a New York City mayor, and I will make sure that all New Yorkers feel safe. Now, that's a generic, broad message, right? You're probably never going to say, no, you know what, if, screw you if your kids don't feel safe, right? But that's how he's phrasing it to people. I haven't heard of many Jewish New Yorkers saying, oh, okay, great, I have great comfort now. Like, they're still, for various reasons, genuinely kind of unsure about him. But, I do think he is making an effort, and I've heard he keeps doing these meetings. It's not a one and done. He's showing up repeatedly. And so I think he is aware of the Jewish community, the Black community, the business community. He's not resting on his laurels.
Yep, it's all true. Haley, thank you. Sean, what do you have tonight?
Harmeet Dillon from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. We got a lot to break down with her. Obviously, redistricting is a big deal because that's what I think some of the Democrats are using as the defense now, is that it undermines redistricting. There's even some quirky stuff. Alan Dershowitz was denied a pierogi this weekend in Martha's Vineyard, claiming his civil rights are being violated. I'll ask her about that. But we got a lot to break down with Harmeet.
Dan, have you been denied pierogi service at any point this summer?
I haven't had a pierogi since college. They're very popular in the Pennsylvania area there, but nope, I have no one.
Apparently in Nantucket, in Martha's Vineyard as well. I didn't know that.
Thankfully, no one's denied me a martini, so I'm okay.
Dan, what are you using for sunblock today when you go back out?
I actually have to work a lot today. I use the orange bottle. It's banana, whatever.
Oh,
banana sport. Yeah, waterproof.
Definitely not Maha approved.
Oh, I'll send you a picture, Mark. The kids are horrified. It's everywhere. Safety first.
Watch those chemicals in there.
They're horrified at the way you've allowed yourself to get sunburn, or they're horrified about when you apply your product?
About I have so much sunscreen on that I look like a ghost.
Well, I've received several messages reinforcing my view that you look like a lobster, and I don't understand.
I can assure you I'm not, but okay, we'll work on the lighting. Noted.
Okay, all right. Noon today, Meghan McCain, Citizen McCain, board certifies internist and addictionologist, Dr. Drew Pinsky. Dr. Drew Pinsky will join Meghan at noon for conversations about just about everything. And then at 6 o'clock tonight, Two-Way Tonight is on. First episode of the week, 6 p.m. with Matt Gorman, Republican strategist, Democrat Brian Wolf. We'll be talking about all the news of the day and if the president decides to do something in public, We will have live team coverage throughout the hour. And a reminder, if you'd like to be a sponsor for any of the programs on Two Way, including this one, you're welcome to reach out and we can tell you more about how our special bespoke two-way community sponsorships work. Send us an email, sponsors@twoway.tv.
Or if you can we do a song one, like if you're a musician and you can come up with a rock version. Yeah.
Hey, Paul, you have our theme song handy?
I love it. Number one.
Paul, do you
I
have
was
our
singing
theme
it
song?
this weekend.
Paul, do you have that? You have the first theme song?
No, the second.
Paul, you got either the theme song?
Welcome to the morning meeting.
Oh, or Dan could just sing it.
Yeah, yeah.
You were young and your
That's not our
That's
theme
the
song.
Beatles.
Although it'd be fantastic if it were.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney.
I saw an Instagram video this weekend that shows basically how and I'm the most, my musical prowess is only second to my dancing prowess, if you get the joke. And I will tell you that there was this whole video about how 4 chords are basically the foundation of every major pop song that we know and love. So which just proves that the morning meeting is just those same 4 chords.
It is. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the Two Way community. And we'll see you tonight at 6 and tomorrow in 23 hours right here. Have a great day.